22. Those first school days of the new year were frightening without Minjean because it made us realize anyone or all of us could be next. Posters and cards reading "one nigger down" and "8 to go" were everywhere. Segregationists left no doubt that they were seizing Minjean's suspension as an opportunity to fire up their campaign. Governor Faubus was adding to our insecurity and revving up segregationist hopes by publicly announcing that the school board should file a petition asking the courts to delay integration. He cited a recent order to that effect in Dallas, Texas, as evidence that Little Rock could do the same. He also constantly threatened to call a special session of the legislature to enact segregation laws unless the feds would immediately take us out of school and halt integration. Once we got back into our daily routine, it was evident that segregationists must have spent their holidays thinking up ways to make us miserable. I could feel their electrifying hope of victory all around me. They walked differently, talked differently, and didn't hesitate to shower us with angry words and deeds, letting us know we were short-timers. I had by then withdrawn from French class because I wasn't able to concentrate with the combined pressure of the extremely hostile students and coping with everything else. I was also concerned that I couldn't do my best in my English, shorthand, and typing classes, all of which would have been a breeze under any other circumstances. Even before lunch on our first day back, we had all begun to experience a hell we could not have imagined. The rumor was that the White Citizens Council would pay reward money to the person who could incite us to misbehave and get ourselves expelled. It was apparent that many students were going for that reward. Boys on motorcycles threw an iron pipe at the car in which Gloria and Carlotta rode to school. Inside school, the group of students whose talent was walking on my heels until they bled met me after each and every class to escort me to the next. I would speed up. They would speed up. I couldn't escape no matter what I did. Ernie and Jeff were bombarded with wet towels, and boys overheated their showers. Gloria and Elizabeth were shoved and kicked. Carlotta was tripped in the hall, and I was knocked face forward onto the floor. Thelma was spared some of the physical abuse during that period because of her petite stature and fragility, but even she was jostled. One of the ever-present and most annoying pastimes was spraying ink or some foul-smelling, staining yellow substance on our clothes, on our books, in our lockers, on our seats, or on whatever of ours they could get their hands on. We complained long and hard to the NAACP. Tufts at CAS Draw NAACP Fire Arkansas Gazette, January 10, 1958. Thurgood Marshall, chief counsel for the NAACP, said Little Rock officials should get tough with the 40 or 50 hardcore white students causing trouble at Central. The Tufts are still pushing our kids around, spitting on them and cursing them, he said. On Monday, January 6, Minjean and her parents met with Superintendent Blossom. She was allowed to return to school. Monday, January 13, with the proviso that she not respond to her attackers in any way. I drew a deep sigh of relief as we discussed the good news by telephone that evening. Fine, I said to her. You can do it. I tried to explain to her what Grandma India had said about freedom being a state of mind. I tried to impress upon her that our being able to make it through the year was the biggest talkback and fightback we could give them. A short time after Minjean's return, a boy doused her with what appeared to be a bucket of soup. She froze in her tracks and did not respond, even as the greasy liquid trickled down her chest and horror painted her face. Afterward, a group of perhaps 50 students gathered outside the principal's office to shout cheers for the douser, saying he had paid her back. He was suspended, but we were frightened that he had set in motion an all-out soup war that could lead to the drenching of each one of us and guarantee a real brawl if we tried to fight back. On January 11, a white girl was also suspended for pushing Elizabeth Eckford down a flight of stairs before a genuine adult witness, a teacher. She was punished, but the others who pushed us downstairs were not. Headlines in the newspapers told of some of the other perils we faced over the next few days. January 15, guard platoon sent to school after threats of bombing. January 17, another racial clash reported at Central High. January 21, dynamite found at CS Blossom C's campaign to try and close school. January 22, another bomb scare disrupts ESS routine. Plus, some appeals for the end of threatening calls. January 23, HS plagued by more bomb scares. January 24, new bomb scare at Central High proves false. January 27, another bomb tossed at LCBATES house. The segregationists were becoming even more vocal, urging the students to harass us at every opportunity. The Central High Mothers League announced a nighttime rally with the Reverend Wesley Pruden, president of the Citizens Council, speaking on what race mixers are planning for us. They issued a special invitation to Central High students. We heard that almost 200 hardcore segregationist students protested our presence by being absent from school on the day of that rally. In addition to all the other indignities and physical pain we endured, we were now taunted by large groups of students who picked certain days simply to stare at us. They came to be known as stare days. Large, boisterous groups of hecklers stared intensely and harassed the living daylights out of us. On several occasions, 70 or so students showed up at school wearing all black to protest our presence. Those were known as Black Days. The segregationists organized a systematic process for phoning our homes at all hours of the night to harass us. They also phoned our parents at their places of work, and any other relatives or friends they could annoy. One day, Terrence's mother rushed into the principal's office, having been called and told her son was seriously injured, only to find the call had been a hoax. Repeated bomb threats were telephoned to our homes. Somebody was also calling in reports to the news media that Minjean had done outrageous things like running nude in the school's hallway. Time after time, she was devastated by reporters' inquiries about some bizarre things she was said to have done in school and gotten away with. Those stories, when printed, only served to agitate students who had already made it their life's work to get her out of school permanently. Late one afternoon, Minjean was waiting outside school for her ride home when she was kicked so hard she couldn't sit down for 2 days. That incident was embarrassingly painful to her in many ways. Her bottom was discussed in the news paper and by people as though it were an object without attach meant to her body, and that hurt her feelings. That incident made her the victim of ridicule. Whenever we spent time together, I could tell she was growing more and more weary. I feared she couldn't take much more of the constant mental and physical pounding. And yet school officials seemed unwilling or unable to stop the war being waged against her. I remember a moment near the end of January when I was struck by the fact that all the school officials were increasingly nervous and behaving as though things had gotten out of control. Even the soldiers of the Arkansas National Guard seemed fearful of what could happen in the hallways of Central. Their presence had always only added to our problems. Now we saw mirrored in their faces a reflection of the danger that surrounded us. I could also see the fear in Mrs. Huckabee's eyes. Somehow in the course of time, she had become our liaison to the other school officials. Even though she was the vice principal of girls, she was the one person we all, both male and female, reported our problems to. Not that she could do anything about them, but she would usually listen. We had also come to trust her at least to be as fair as she could under the circumstances. I thought that she, too, must be under a lot of pressure. During those late January days, we had kept the door to her office swinging. We would meet each other coming in and going out with our complaints, sometimes teary-eyed, sometimes smoldering with anger. On January 27, I wrote in my diary, "The National Veterans Organization has awarded us the Americanism Award. They think we are heroines and heroes. Why are we only niggers to beat up onto the students at Central? Hi, I don't know if I can make it now. It's really, really hard. Why should life be so hard? When will it ever be fun to live again?" We had real evidence that school officials weren't certain of their ability to protect us when, on the day of a pep rally, Mrs. Huckabee suggested that Thelma, Minjean, Elizabeth, and I sit in her office rather than be exposed to the hostility and physical abuse that certainly awaited us. We were having more frequent meetings with Mrs. Bates and other NAACP officials about our problems. Despite our conversations and all the public declarations that school officials could protect us, the truth was, things were getting worse by the moment. When it came to Minjean's suspension, segregationists were like sharks who tasted a drop of blood in the water. Their determination to have their kill, to see her gone, brought us to an impasse. If some resolution were not found, it seemed certain all of us would be forced to leave school within the week. Mrs. Bates says, 9 Negroes won't quit despite trouble. Arkansas Gazette, January 29, 1958. As determined as everyone else was to have me remain at Central, with each passing day, I began to doubt that I was strong enough to tough it out. Even as I watched the others weaken, I could feel myself growing weary and nervous. When I had a long period of time alone on a Saturday, I leafed through the pages of my diary. I had not been fully aware of how deeply the turmoil at school was affecting me. I was stunned to see what I had written. "I wish I were dead." That was the entry for several days running in late January. "God, please let me be dead until the end of the year." I was willing to bargain and plead with God. I revised my request. I just wanted to become invisible. For a month or two, I clutched the diary to my chest and wept. For a long time. "No," I whispered aloud. "I do wish I were dead. Then all the pain and hurt would be over." I fell to my knees and prayed about it. That's when I knew I should go and talk to Grandma India. I told her about my wish to be dead. "Good idea," she said. She didn't even look up at me as though she were alarmed after I whimpered out my confess. Sion. Instead, she continued dusting the dining room table. My feelings were hurt, and then she looked me in the eye and said it again. "Good idea. How did you plan going about it?" "Ma'am," I wasn't certain I'd heard her. I said, "I wish I were dead. Did you hear me?" And I said, "Good idea." Her voice was louder as she peered at me with a mischievous expression. "The sooner you get started, the sooner you'll make the segregationists real happy. They'll love broadcasting the headlines across the world." She braced the palm of one hand on the table to balance herself as she paused for a long moment to think. "I've got it. The headlines will read, 'Little Rock heroine gives in to segregationists. Kills herself.'" "What do you mean?" I gasped. I felt really angry that she talked as though she didn't care. She kept on creating new headlines about my death. Or maybe they could write, "Melba Pattillo died by her own hand because she was afraid of facing God's assignment for her." "Oh, no, ma'am." I slumped down into a chair. She wouldn't let up. "Then, of course, there would be the celebration all the segregationists would plan. Let's see now. I'll bet they would rent the Robinson Auditorium for their party. It would be kind of like the wrestling matches, you know, loud, with all the cheering, singing, and dancing." She looked back down at the scratches on the table and continued dusting. "So do as you please. But I'd also think about that moment at which you'd have to face the Lord and explain your decision to him." She ignored me, humming her hymn, "I'm on the battlefield for my Lord." I stood there for a moment watching her. That did it. I realized dying wasn't a good idea. I was almost certain God wouldn't allow people to die for only a short while and come back. After that, Grandma arranged for a daily time when I had to come to her room, get down on my knees, and pray with her. Then she and I would talk about what was troubling me and what I would like. We would play Yahtzee or read pages from some fun novel I would choose. Sometimes we'd read through the newspaper together, but only the good things like the launching of an American satellite into orbit that circled the Earth in 116 minutes. During those days I felt so close to her, and I knew I had been silly for wanting to give up. Several times she looked at me and said, "Don't you know, child, how much I love you, how much your mama loves you? Whenever you think about going away from this earth, think about how you'd break my heart and your brother's heart. You might as well take your mother with you because she'd be beside herself." She made me get a project I really liked and encouraged me to keep on top of it. I chose the blast off of the Explorer, the satellite that put our country into the space race. I had always been interested in rockets and space. Once I had run away to the Strategic Air Command base in a nearby town to see if they would allow me to become a pilot. Grandma studied up on the topic, and we talked for hours while she taught me how to do the quilting for Mother's birthday present. Meanwhile, Mother Lois urged me to give Vince a standing invitation to Sunday supper. I couldn't understand why she was being so nice. I think Grandma talked to her about our conversation, and she was trying to cheer me up. Sometimes Vince came even when I didn't want him to. There were times when I just wanted to stay in my room and think, because I had no energy or desire to do anything else. Everything in me was devoted to being a full-time warrior. When I wasn't actually on the battlefield, surviving, I was thinking about how to do it, or worried that I wouldn't be able to make it. Every day, Grandma and I prayed hard for Minjean to have strength and peace of mind, and for all of us to be able to feel God's love for us, even in the face of those who spewed so much hatred our way. For the second time, on Thursday, February 6, Minjean was attacked by the boy who dumped soup on her. During the ruckus that followed, There was a great deal of confusion. The identity of who attacked and who fought back was not clear. Her attackers accused her of retaliation. White trash were the words they reported her to have said. In addition, they accused her of throwing a purse at a girl when she was sent home without receiving a suspension. No. Tice, I breathed a sigh of relief. But at the end of the day, Mrs. Huckabee gave Carlotta a sealed envelope to be delivered to Minjean.